It's what, T-1, maybe T-2 days to go before we eventually leave Lembeh.
2 hours ago we were kayaking in brilliant blue sunshine and flat seas, and now we've got a big squall coming through.
This is absolutely disgusting. We're taking the generator in, we've had issues with the generator. We think it's electrical. There is a place in Manado that might be able to help. We have inherited two problems recently. We've got a problem with the outboard, and what's happening is it's sort of dropping power as the engine warms up, and I suspect it's possibly temperature sensor maybe has gone on it. I'm not entirely sure, but coincidentally we also had a similar problem with the generator. This is our Honda 2 kilowatt generator. What's happening is that after running it for about 10 minutes under full load, it drops output, and it drops from 1900 watts down to about 600-700 watts. So the battery's only getting charged at sort of 40-50 amps instead of 120. So I was chatting to John, our dive guide, and he said, well, speak to Rizard. And Rizard, along with Yuli, who you can see here, are the two that you saw working on the outboard on our very first dive. And Rizard is a bit of a handyman mechanic. So rather than taking the generator into town with a broken outboard, which is 2 miles away, John said, well, let Rizard have a look at it first. And that is what he's doing. He's just stripping down the carb first, and then we'll see if we can run it under load, and we'll see how the generator does after that.
The problem Jamie is explaining first developed as we were approaching Sulawesi. It meant that on cloudy days when we weren't motoring, we'd frequently have to run the Honda, but something was being throttled, and so the charge would drop, taking many hours to charge the batteries. Despite Rizard's expertise, the problem persisted, and Jamie suspected the inverter circuit as being the problem. It was time to take the generator into Manado to an official Honda workshop. The good news is that Rizard identified a blocked hose on our outboard, so at least we could make the journey across the strait in our dinghy without issue.
What a beautiful view behind me, eh? And that direction is Manado, which is the capital town of northeast Sulawesi, and that is where we are heading today. It's what, T-1, maybe T-2 days to go before we eventually leave Lembeh and start heading west. So we're just going to do a bit of last minute shopping, but more importantly, we are going to visit a special guest for lunch. This is an unexpected pleasure. We haven't seen this person in a very long time, and it would be really good to catch up. It just turns out that they happen to have got in contact and say they are flying over for business. So looking forward to that. The other thing we're doing is we're taking the generator in. We've had issues with the generator. We think it's electrical. There is a place in Manado that might be able to help, but if they've got to ship parts from Jakarta, then we're just going to have to take it back in its semi-working state. Anyway, let's go. This is the sort of main port, I suppose, for all the smaller fishing boats. The commercial vessels tend to anchor out there, but this is where we tie up the dinghy, and it's always a bit of fun and games here. The idea is you have to drop an anchor out the back of the dinghy, take it to the jetty wall, tie ashore and let the dinghy drift back. I don't know if our driver Ronald is here yet, but we were kind of hoping he might give us a hand with the generator. Liz is expertly taking us to the jetty wall. That's the jetty wall there, so you can see the orange float behind me. That's about where we drop the anchor. But first of all, we're going to just take the dinghy up to the jetty so we can get this generator off. Fortunately, it's fairly high water, so we've not got too far to lift the generator.
Hello, Jamie.
Ronald, come and say hello to the camera.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you, Jamie?
Yeah, very well.
Okay.
Thank you. So, the blue bus, by the way, are the sort of local buses that will take you anywhere around town for a very cheap price. And that was Ronald, our driver. So let's get cracking because we need to get to Manado and drop this generator off. not going to bore you with updates of our road trip, but Ronald is taking us through the bypass, which is a new road that takes us straight to Manado. It's a lot quicker, got to pay a toll. But what's interesting is, apart from the beautiful countryside and glimpses of the tips of mosque domes and even church steeples as we go past, but we actually get to see the sea that we're going to be heading towards next week. This is the open water, so it's outside of the protection of Lembeh Island, and what is encouraging to see is that the sea state is pretty flat. We have had some winds coming straight up the coast, and that of course is what we want to avoid, so it's encouraging to see at the moment when there is no wind. It's looking pretty benign, so we're expecting to be motoring for the first few days of our trip before we get to our next destination, and then after that hopefully we're going to be getting some sailing in. But not before some shopping for toilet paper in Manado. Right, morning, isn't it? So Ronald very kindly has just picked up the generator here. This is Ivan, who speaks very good English, very knowledgeable, and this is the place that they said that they could try and repair it but might have to order parts, so it's noisy.
As you can hear, this shop also services chainsaws, that ubiquitous sound we hear across every village in Indonesia. We left the generator with Ivan and his colleagues and continued on our journey. Next stop, coffee.
On a very busy street corner right in the centre of Manado is this coffee shop. We came to this coffee shop last time and it's Ronald's recommendation. And I have to say it's a very good recommendation because the coffee is exceptional. Well, the reason why I wanted to record it is to show you the roastery they have that's attached to the shop. But don't forget, of course, Indonesia is famous for its coffee. We've all heard of Java coffee. Sulawesi also has its own coffee, although I think they source coffee from around Indonesia at this place. We're going to go and find out more and have a look in the roastery and enjoy one of their excellent cappuccinos. Meaning to buy fuel bulbs for ages, one for a spare for the outboard and one as a possibility of putting inline for our engine as well. We do have an electric pump, very difficult to know if it's working when the engine's on. One tip was to put one of these bulbs in so at least you can manually pump fuel through. And we finally found someone that actually does genuine Yamaha parts. This is an outboard shop. There's some big Yamaha engines here, so I'm glad that we've found this place. So it's only been an hour and Sumber Mesin, which is the shop we took the generator to, called up to say they think they've fixed it. I'll find out what they've done in a minute, but you can see a guy with a heat gun here and another fan, and they've been running it, and they said they've been running it for 10 minutes at 1800 watts, and it's managed to maintain that output. So we'll find out exactly what the problem was.
I think the problem come from the carburetor, not the ECU or inverter, because we need to recalibrate the carburetor and clean the carburetor. When after we finish fix the carburetor, the echo throttle is okay.
So that was Ivan just explaining that apparently it's something to do with the carburetor. Now this is interesting because it was only the other week we saw Rizard actually did a strip down of the carb, and one thing I did notice is when he put it back together the timing was slightly out, so I'm hoping that it's not just that, but they say they've run it for about 15 minutes at around about 1600 watts. So really the only test we can do now is to take it back to the boat. You know, if it is something else that these guys have missed, there's not much we can do about it here anyway. We were always going to get it done in Lombok, but yeah, well, let's see. I've paid 150, which is about £7, £8 for an hour's work. Let's see. Well, here we are. We're outside our restaurant to meet our old friend. This place has come recommended by a couple of people. We've actually already driven past it 6 times because Liz misplaced her sunglasses and thought she'd left them at the bank, at the hairdressers. She's had a haircut. Look, show us your hair. Right, let's see if our friend is there.
Yes, it's James Koo of Pancor Marina, over in Sulawesi on business. It was so nice to catch up with an old friend on new territory. After lunch, one more stop for an almost impossible to find boat park.
Right, one thing that we haven't really discussed is our VHF not working, and one of the issues is probably the cable. So I've actually been on the hunt for RG8 cable, which is, it's like gold dust. It's really difficult to find. However, with our driver today, Ronald, in the town of Manado, we have found a shop. This man, these girls, and
can we take a picture?
this is RG8.
Yes.
Now we've got to do the whole selfie thing, so bear with us. Where's the boss?
We were so happy that Ronald was able to sniff out that hard-to-find cable, which was tucked away down a back street that visitors like us would never have found.
Big boss, big boss.
Oh, that's Big Boss. Lovely.
We were able to source pretty much everything we needed in Manado, so after a long day it was time to return to Bitung.
And just like that, by the magic of cinematography, we are back. Thanks to Ronald, who's now very kindly helping us with the bags. So we have a possible working generator. We have toilet paper. We have Liz's special oranges that she needs for her muesli in the morning. And a few other things as well, of course. So hopefully this is going to be the last run that we do. Yep, bits for the outboard, fuel hose, fuel pumps, that kind of thing. So it's all good. And we've got enough time to get back to the boat before it gets dark. And don't forget, of course, we're going to be going a lot slower because we've got a lot of stuff to carry in the dinghy. Can you see all the way over there? Right the way across the bay? That's where we're anchored.
Oh, I'm just tying the kayak off because we're going to take the kayaks, go and have an explore around the island, just to get a feel for the currents, to see how realistic it is we can kayak anywhere. But this is the first time we've kayaked in Indonesia, isn't it? Is it? No.
Yeah, I think so. So this island is surrounded by coral. It didn't take long before leaving Esper to arrive in the shallows of the island, and I think actually this is actually one of the dive spots just on the fringes of this island here, which we've yet to do, but I'm in about 1 foot of water. It's super clear and it's just covered in coral, also sea urchins. Not the kind of place you want to fall out your dinghy in, but super clear, so clear. Liz is already ashore. One disappointing thing that you will notice is the amount of rubbish. Now what tends to happen here is that on a certain tide the rubbish gets caught up, and of course this is a strait, so you've got a thin mouth at each end and then there's open water in here, which is very protected, but it does mean that rubbish can collect, and very occasionally you get periods of just shit everywhere, and then it all clears up. But of course some of that does end up on the shores of the island, which is a very popular spot at the weekend with day trippers and local people to hang out.
There's a whole load of eroded arches up here because it's probably mainly limestone, sandstone. And around here it's all eroded away, so there's kind of little... Go and explore on the kayak.
There you go, there's the first of the locals turning up for their Sunday, it's not Sunday, it's Saturday, their weekend little trip ashore. And we have one of those little mini spider jobs coming in. He's not fishing, it looks like he has a whole load of guests aboard. Let's see if we can get a closer look. Now check out these I call them perambulators because they just remind me of prams, but these things are very, very fast. We've seen them before, we've showed you them before on our vlogs, but they're very curious looking vehicles. What's your name?
2 hours ago we were kayaking in brilliant blue sunshine and flat seas, and now we've got a big squall coming through. It's not even showing on the radar app that we use, it just comes out of nowhere. We're pointing now, we're going back towards the island, so we keep a careful eye on the depth. We're still at 8.9 last time I looked, and we seem to be holding, but obviously we just do need to keep an eye on that. We're ready to put the engine on if we need to, but yeah, it's very wet.
Jobs to do while it's raining outside. Good opportunity to check your leaks, and we have two, we've got a few, but two that are very annoying, and I think both are solved by a little bit of silicone. So it's the little hatch closing handle where it's been riveted on the tab that the handle clicks into, and it leaks through that, so it's quite a simple solution. The only problem is bloody silicone. You know, even if you keep this refrigerated, it has a short shelf life, and it's a bit of a pain because this one I've only used half of it, and it's completely hardened up at the end. So what I tend to do is to stab it somewhere down there, and you can normally find a little wet patch, but no, can you hear that out there? So yeah, that's going in the bin. That's very annoying, isn't it? You can get smaller tubes of silicone. I have seen them, but only very occasionally. I think they're preferable for jobs like this. You don't have to open up a whole bloody tube, but it's pretty cheap, but it's just such a shame to waste a whole tube of the stuff. Jamie's DIY musings while it pisses with rain out there. But it turns out I've run out of silicone altogether. I normally have 2 or 3 tubes on the boat. If there are any more, they're probably deep at the bottom of the fridge. So an alternative is this. This is an epoxy sausage. Now, I've talked about this before. It's one of my favourite things to keep on the boat because it's extremely versatile, and most importantly, you can actually apply this in the wet. So it's just it's the epoxy putty itself, and then a hardener, a resin and the hardener, and you cut off equal amounts and you squish it up into a little ball like this. And then I don't need much at all, just take a little pinch. I'm just going to shape it around the outside of that rivet hole to close it up. And the other thing is that it's very hard wearing, but should I need to, I can break this away if I have to re-rivet that hole or remove the fitting altogether. So I'm hoping that this stuff should do the trick, at least in the short term. I couldn't show you me actually applying this stuff because it meant opening the hatch, and it's still pissing with rain out there, so it's letting in lots of water, but just very quickly managed to open it up and just use that epoxy putty just to mould it around the outside of that rivet, and look, works instantly, and it's worked in the saloon as well. Random log entry in between all the diving we're doing here. Generally the waters have been pretty clear, but this afternoon occasionally you see this. This is absolutely disgusting. Look, all this shit in the water. A lot of it is wood, but there are big sacks floating under the water waiting to wrap around your prop and your rudder. There was a number plate, I think, that floated past. We've just come back from town, so the dinghy's in the water. That is surrounded by crap. We've discussed this so many times. It is well documented as well. But we were talking the other day about how they just don't seem to care. And this is the result of it. We chatted to one guy who said that he was visiting a village out in the mountains, and they had a river that ran through their village, and they were literally just lobbing their rubbish from their homes into the river. Out of sight, out of mind. The river, where does it take it all? It takes it all around Esper when we're anchored here. It's filthy. It is the depressing side of cruising around Southeast Asia, and I will keep documenting about it. I will keep talking about it, and I will keep pleading with these Southeast Asian governments to do something about it, because it's atrocious, especially with this being a prime dive location.